Welcome to this hybrid in-person and virtual meeting for the Committee of Adjustment for the Township of Central Frontenac. Just so you know, members of the public are able to join in person or online. For those of you who may be new to the Committee of Adjustment, my name is Susan Irwin, and I am chair of the committee. We also have with us Dan Meeks, a counselor. He's on online or virtual. On my far left, we have Nikki Gowdy. Beside her, Philip Smith, the esteemed William Everett. On my right, we have Councillor Lynn Clegus, and beside her, Duncan McGregor. I also have sitting right adjacent to me our CAO of the township, Kathy McMunn, and planning staff for the county, Jenny Kapuska. There we go. All right. And last but not least, Chris Nelson, who's handling all the technical aspect, and that's a good thing. The format of the meeting will follow the agenda posted online. Staff have also prepared, that's Jenny, a presentation for everyone to follow along with during the meeting, and this will be shown on the screen. For each application with a public hearing, we will follow this format. So I, as the chair, get to introduce the file so that everyone knows where we are on the agenda. The planner will then provide an overview of the application. We will then ask for any comments from the applicant or their agent. Committee members may then ask staff and the applicant or their agent questions if there are any. And then the public has the opportunity to ask questions or provide comments. And I certainly encourage anyone who's here or online to ask any questions you might have. The committee will then deliberate and vote on the application. Voting will take place with members of the committee raising their hands or verbal confirmation if attending online. And where was I? There we go. I will then state whether the vote was carried. All members of the public will have an opportunity to provide comments on the new applications. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Central Frontenac before a decision is made, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. As of January 1st, 2023, only persons specified in the Planning Act are permitted to appeal consent and minor variance applications. Township staff will be in touch following the meeting and will be forwarding a copy of the decision within 15 days to the applicant and anyone who has requested to be notified. Should you have any questions about the meeting, we encourage you to reach out to staff. The applicant, the minister, or any prescribed public body who has an interest in the matter may, within 20 days of making the decision or date of notice, appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal against the decision of the committee by filing with the Secretary-Treasurer of the committee a notice of appeal. I'm now going to turn it over to Chris to provide an overview of how members attending virtually can participate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once the meeting is open to the public, the chair will ask if anyone has any questions or comments. Members of the public attending virtually will be asked to use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. This alerts us that you would like to speak. Staff will then notify the chair that someone would like to speak and then proceed to unmute your microphone. You will receive a notification that your microphone has been unmuted. Please wait a second after unmuting your microphone before speaking. If you're calling in by phone, please use *9 when you would like to raise your hand during the meeting. You will hear a prompt on the phone that you have raised your hand and you will be notified that your microphone has been unmuted. This afternoon, it looks like we have 1 member of the public participating with us online and 8 in person.
In the unlikely account that we have connection issues and the meeting cannot be restored within 15 minutes, The meeting will be postponed and staff will be in touch with each applicant. A notice will be posted on the township's social media, letting you know. Okay, so moving along with our agenda, the first item is a motion to approve the agenda. Are there any additions or amendments?
No, there are not, Madam Chair.
So the motion is moved by Bill Everett and seconded by Philip Smith that the agenda be adopted as presented. All in favor? Carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. And we have a motion moved by Philip Smith and seconded by Bill Everett that the minutes of January 11th, 2024 be adopted as, are there any amendments or changes?
No, there are none, Madam Mayor.
Okay, that the
Or Madam
minutes,
Chair, I guess.
Madam Chair,
I'm used to the chair, but the mayor, right?
that the minutes be adopted as presented. All in favor? Carried. Now, are there any deferred items?
No, there are not.
Then we're moving on to agenda item 6, which is the applications for consent. And we have 2 for Brannigan Holdings, B-46-23 Hinchinbrook, and B-47-23 Hinchinbrook. We have separate resolutions, but there is a common planning report. So I'll turn it over to Jenny, and remember to turn off my mic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is are 2 applications for consent, but we will be considering them together as they are coming from the same property. It's just easier to have one discussion and highlight the differences between the 2 applications. So this is a proposal for the creation of 2 new rural residential lots, each approximately 1.2 hectares or 3 acres in area, with between 93 and 100 meters of each of frontage on Richard Brannigan Trail, which is a private road. More on that on the next slide. Both the severed and retained parcels are zoned rural and designated rural in the township official plan. There's no changes recommended to either of those. The retained parcel will have approximately 106 meters of frontage on Road 38, as well as 619 meters of frontage on Richard Brannigan Trail. It'll have an area of about 9.7 hectares or 24 acres. So here on the next slide, you can see an image. The subject property is outlined in red with each of the proposed lots being highlighted here at the rear of the property. So as I noted, Richard Brannigan Trail is a private road and it does bisect this property shown in the purple dashed line that leads from Road 38 on the left of the picture to the KMP Trail at the right. As it is a private road, it does not have the effect of creating any additional parcels the way it would if it were a public road. So each of these lots is still a single property, despite the fact that the road runs right through the middle of them. That's just to access each one. In addition, because it's a private road and not a township maintained road, both of these proposed lots will require a right-of-way over the retained parcel, as well as the creation of the lot in order to have legal access to the properties. These applications were circulated for review by, for information for Quinte Conservation rather than formal comments. They were pre-consulted. The drainage ditch that is located on this property that bisects the retained parcel is not considered a regulated feature. So formal comments were not required as this property does not have any other natural hazard features within it. With the applications, we're provided a review from an independent septic contractor that both of the proposed lots are suitable for septic installation with flexibility on the location of that septic on both of the proposed properties. There were public comments received. There's a neighbor inquiry regarding the legal description of the subject property and some slight confusion between the lot and concession noted on this property being the same as theirs. Many properties will be subject to the same lot and concession description as the lot in reference for that is one of the original 200-acre lots that were surveyed in the 1800s. So in this case, a lot is not just the lot that you own, but it is the original 200-acre lot that would have been identified. So lots and concessions can be a bit tricky, but I do want to make sure that everyone knows we are not not proposing to subdivide any property other than the applicant's property. None of the neighbors' properties will be divided through these applications. Subject to any comments that are received at the meeting here today, planning staff are recommending that the committee approve both applications as submitted and subject to conditions outlined in the planning report, including in this case that lot number 2 or B4623HI needs to be completed, finalized, and registered at the land registry office prior to the certificate of official for lot number 1 to be created. And that's because the Planning Act doesn't allow the creation of more than one lot with a single application. If lot 1 were approved first, you'd have both the retained parcel and lot 2 as part of that. So there's just a slight order of operations that need to take place there. Also, both properties will be required to create a right-of-way over Richard Brannigan Trail to ensure that they each have legal access in the future. Additional conditions include having each property surveyed, parkland dedication fee for each new property, outstanding taxes, and certificates for both need to be signed within a period of 2 years.
Thank you, Jenny. Are the applicants present? And if so, are there any comments or questions?
We have one online.
Hi, good evening. It's Aaron Brannigan. I apologize, unable to make it in person, but I did log on in time for the meeting. I don't have any questions or comments, but wish to thank township staff who were very helpful during the application process. And thank you for your consideration this evening.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Philip.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask about the minimum separation distance calculations, and county staff had indicated that there was no need to do one based on nothing in the barn. If that changes, I guess my question is, if that changes, what happens in the future for these lots when they're developed?
Excellent question. So the barn on the subject property, the retained, is not capable of livestock. Were they to want to add livestock to that or expand it in any way, that would then be subject to an MDS2 calculation for the creation or expansion of any livestock facilities. So these new residential lots would then be taken into consideration. They're not actually permitted to have livestock based on the zoning and proximity to the retirement home on the neighboring property. That was one of the conditions when that was severed, that the barn on this property wasn't to have livestock. The zoning's a little backwards in that case, but that was the intent at that point. And most likely the senior's home would have a greater impact due to its proximity on the barn.
Are there any other questions from members of the public? Yes. Please come up.
Just one question. What is the intention to sever and convey parcels as new lots?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Yes, they're looking to make 2 new lots. At this point, that's the information we have. Based on their size, most likely it would be residential development, as the size is too small for agricultural uses. But I don't have any confirmed plans at this point.
Okay, I guess that would mean residential in terms of a home would be constructed.
Yes, that would be one of the permitted uses. There's a variety of different residential uses. So single detached, tiny home, mobile home permitted within the rural zone. So the same ones that would be permitted today would be permitted on each of these lots.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Before you go, my omission, could I please have your name?
Yes, my name is Sybil Marias.
You got that, Kathy?
Last name, sorry, the last name again?
Oh, last name is Marias, Moraes.
Okay. Thank you.
And thank you for your question. So we have 2 motions for deliberation by the committee. Moved by Bill Everett and seconded by Philip Smith, that consent application B-46-23 Hinchinbrook for Parts Lot 13, Concession 2, Geographic Township of Hinchinbrook, for a 1.2 hectare or 3-acre parcel as a new lot be approved, subject to the conditions noted in the planning report. That the secretary, is that when we do our vote at that point, and then I read the rest?
Yes.
It's all right, I'm a bit new at this, so just bear with me. So, all in favor? All right, carried. That the secretary treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed, and that all conditions outlined in the notice of decision shall be completed and the certificate of official issued within a period of 2 years after the notice of decision was issued, as required by the Planning Act. And then we have a motion moved by Philip Smith and seconded by William Everett, that consent application B-47-23 Hinchinbrook for Parts Lot 13, Concession 2, Geographic Township of Hinchinbrook, for a 1.2 hectare, 3-acre parcel as a new lot be approved, subject to the conditions noted in the planning report. All in favor? And that is carried. That the secretary treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing a notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed. And that all conditions outlined in the notice of decision shall be completed and the certificate of official issued within a period of 2 years after the notice of decision was issued, as required by the Planning Act. Okay, so that one was carried. Now, next on our agenda is an application for consent, number B-49-23 Hinchinbrook for Struthers. So Jenny?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an application for the creation of 1 new rural lot, property located part lots 8, 9, and 10 in concession 5, Geographic Township of Hinchinbrook, municipally known as 1390 Struthers Road. So the proposed severed parcel will have approximately 256 meters of frontage on Struthers Road, with the retained parcel having about 317 meters of frontage. The area for the severed parcel is just over 70 acres or 28.6 hectares, with the retained parcel being 192 hectares, or about 475 acres in area. Both severed and retained are zoned and designated rural, with no changes proposed. Here on the next one, you can see the submission, or this application included the submission of a survey sketch outlining the severed and retained parcels. I've highlighted them in blue and yellow just to make sure it's easier to understand. So in this case, the severed parcel is the blue one at the lower end, and the yellow at the top is the retained. Reynoldston Lake, which is located within the subject property, will remain with the retained parcel, and the shoreline of the severed parcel will follow the property line of the severed parcel will follow the shoreline of Reynoldston Lake. So that way the lake is with the retained and the severed is without that. My understanding is that the intent is to allow use of the lake, but rather than bisecting any natural features, it was easier to have this be the property line because it followed features on the ground. When this application initially came in and the applicants came to talk to planning staff, there were some concerns with regards to the location of Struthers Road and whether the property even had any frontage on a public road. So on the screen, you see two images. On the left is an excerpt from Frontenac Maps. So that's the county maintained mapping service that generally shows the property lines and road locations throughout central Frontenac. Based on that, the township road allowance outlined in red was nowhere near the traveled portion of Struthers Road, which is shown in black. That would present a problem for this property, as it then legally and technically wouldn't have road frontage for the retained parcel. So the applicants went out and retained the services of an Ontario land surveyor, which determined, in fact, there was an error, which happens with mapping online. And Struthers Road actually is located almost entirely, except for one bump out at the lower part, within the township road allowance. So on the right-hand side, you can see the yellow block is the township road allowance that was identified, and the red line is the traveled portion of Struthers Road. So while it doesn't entirely stay within the road allowance, there is sufficient frontage for both the severed and retained parcels to meet the township policies for new lot creation. Here on the next one, it's just a slightly larger view of the aerial. You can kind of get a concept of the size of the parcels we're looking at. So the portion of Struthers Road that was their reference is this, if you can see my cursor, only the bottom third portion of the subject property even has frontage on Struthers Road, and that still gives sufficient, with the proposed lot being the hatched yellow outline at the bottom. This application was reviewed by the Township of Central Frontenac for septic suitability. Comments received from the building department said there was no objections to the application as proposed, and the site was flexible with regards to siting a sewage system. The application was circulated for review to Quinte Conservation Authority due to the presence of multiple natural features on the property. The Conservation Authority had no objections to the application. They did note that the presence of Reynoldston Lake, as well as various wetlands, water bodies, and other water courses within the subject property. It was also noted that while they had no objection, as there's sufficient area for development outside any hazard lands identified, permits would be required from the Conservation Authority within 30 to 120 meters of the different wetlands based on their size, as well as within 45 meters of Reynoldston Lake. Again, given the size and scope of both the severed and retained, it's unlikely they're going to be less than the required setbacks for these, but they may need permits anyway. There was a comment received from a neighbor with questions regarding continued access to Reynoldston Lake. Township and planning staff did respond with the note that any existing legal access or rights of way that were in place for access to that lake would remain unchanged by this application. If the access was via the unopened township road allowance, which runs along the western side of the subject property, that is still a township-owned road allowance. And if that was the path used to gain access, that would be still available. So the creation of new lots does not impact anything that's registered on title or exists as a legal right-of-way. Planning staff are recommending that, subject to any comments heard here at the meeting, that the committee approve this application, subject to conditions in the planning report. These include survey or legal description of the new lot, a road widening along Struthers Road, as while it was identified that mostly it was within the road allowance, it wasn't even straight within there. So to ensure that there was enough area for the road and the road allowance, the road widening recommendation was included, and that's just to make sure that the road's where it needs to be going forward if upgrades are needed to be done. Also, the parkland dedication fee, any outstanding taxes, the same certificate of official signed within 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Are there any questions or comments from the applicant? Okay, and yes, please. And if you would please state your name.
My name is John Struthers, and I'm representing my mother, the owner of the property. And the only comment that I have is I'd like to thank the staff for their help during the process and thank the committee for their consideration of the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Struthers. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee? Are there any questions from the public, either present or online?
There's no one online.
No one online? No one jumping to come up to the front? Okay, all right. Then we have a motion that is moved by William Everett and Philip Smith, that consent application B-49-23 Hinchinbrook for lots 8, 9, 10, concession 5, geographic township of Hinchinbrook, for a 28.6 hectare or 70.7 acres parcel as a new lot be approved, subject to the conditions noted in the planning report. All in favor? And it is carried. So once again, I'll read that the Secretary Treasurer shall issue the notice of decision in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, including providing the notice of decision to the applicant, any person or public body that made a written request to be notified, and any other person or public body prescribed, and that all conditions outlined in the notice of decision shall be completed and the certificate of official issued within a period of 2 years after the notice of decision was issued, all as required by the Planning Act. So back to the agenda. Are there any applications for minor variance?
No, there are not, Madam.
Seeing as there are none, is there any other planning business?
Not that I'm aware of.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, then you can have a motion for adjournment. And our trustee counselors have been very diligent in moving forward these motions. I'd like to thank Philip Smith for moving and William Everett for seconding that this meeting be adjourned until 6 p.m., March 14th, 2024, virtually and in person at Oso Hall, 1107 Garrett Street, Sharbot Lake. All in favor? I'd like to thank all of you for coming. It's a pleasure to see a full house.